Redline Logbook here to talk about part 6 of the Hestia familia. So where we left off, the Hestia familia just won their war game with the Apollo familia, and they took all of Apollo familia's possessions. So they took his home and all of his money. And with that, they were able to, of course, move in, but renovate whatever they needed and whatever they wanted. What they needed, for example, was Wealth getting his forge, and Makoto getting her bath is what they wanted. But this also made the Hestia familia extremely famous across the city. And so bunch of new adventurers who were just moving into Aurora decided they wanted to apply to be new members. Now, while Bell was super excited about his familia being able to grow really big and having one on par with the Loki or Freya familia, Hestia and the rest of his familia were more reasonable, saying that they're going to pick and choose who they let in. They're not just going to let all these people in. The reason for that is because, obviously, the Hestia familia has their own philosophy and way of doing things. And if any of these people can't integrate into that, then obviously they don't belong. So the original plan was to have a one-on-one meeting with every single one of the applicants. That is, Makoto revealed to the world that the Hestia familia is millions of Valis in debt. And they already spent all of Apollo's money doing all the renovations, so they can't even use that to pay off the debt. And as you can imagine, every single one of those people who wanted to apply to join the Hestia familia ran out of there in a second. Hestia was now known as the goddess of debt. And so the Hestia familia then had to come to the realization that they're never going to get bigger until they get rid of this debt. And so the familia decided to just start taking on missions from the guild. One night, while they were eating dinner, Chikasa showed up to talk to Makoto. Obviously, Belle, Lily, and Wealth at a distance was spying on this conversation. They couldn't hear anything, but they could see the stress and fear that was on both their faces. And so they continued to watch over Makoto until one night she decided to go to bed. Obviously, this was a lie. She then snuck out in the middle of the night to meet up with Chikasa. And of course, Belle and his group followed. Makoto and Chikasa went all the way to the Pleasure District, which is a section of the city filled with prostitutes. They do other things as well, but it's mostly prostitutes. Pleasure District has different sections for different tastes, obviously, and one of the sections that exist is the Red Light District, which is based off of the Far East. A lot of Far East women, or at least women who are dressed like Far Easterners, are there. Now, obviously, it's the middle of the night during the Pleasure District, and so there's a lot of hustle and bustle happening, and somehow Belle just gets separated, and Lily and Wealth don't even notice. We'll get back to Belle. The issue was, because they're in the Red Light District, the area with the Eastern aesthetic, Makoto and Chikasa are, well, Eastern, and so a bunch of male gods thought they were prostitutes and were trying to pick them up. Obviously, because they're gods, Makoto and Chikasa can't really do anything that's disrespectful or violent towards them, so they're basically just stuck there in a very negative situation. And so Lily and Wealth, specifically Wealth, the male, had to reveal that they were following the two of them, so this way they could rescue them. And so Mitsuka and Chikasa had to reveal why they're there, and that answer is they're looking for an old friend from the Far East. Apparently, rumor has it that she showed up in Aurora, but as a prostitute. Back to Belle. He's wandering around, and he happens to see a very rare demi-human, a Renard. Obviously, she's a prostitute sitting in the window waiting to be picked. Then a crowd just walks past, separating the two from vision, and the Renard is now gone. Belle tries looking for her because he's just fascinated to see a Renard, when he just happens to bump into Hermes. Hermes is impressed that Belle is there to pick up women. Belle tries to explain, but Hermes doesn't want to hear it, plus he has a job to do. So he just gives Belle some aphrodisiac and just leaves him there. Yeah, that's important, because literally the next person Belle runs into is Aisha, a member of the Ishtar familia, an Amazon, and a prostitute. Now, Amazons are very particular in the way they do things. One, they love fighting, and two, they love strong men. And unfortunately for Belle, he's a super rookie, and so Aisha and a bunch of other Amazon friends of hers immediately recognize him and kidnap his ass. They don't just kidnap him, they drag him all the way to their base, to the Ishtar familia home, where all the rooms are currently being used, which means there's a lot of Amazons having sex tonight, which, they're prostitutes, that makes sense. And they are all going to use him for the entire night. And Bella's scared because it's not that having sex is scary, it's the fact that he knows what Amazons do to a man once they discover that he's a powerful male. He knows they are going to use him and abuse him until he is a shell of himself. This won't end in a single night. He will be used until he is no longer able to even function anymore. They will break his soul, his spirit, and everything. He will be an empty husk of a man. And so Belle is already scared. But then things get even worse when the captain of the familia shows up, Fryme, who is a fat, ugly woman that looks like a toad. And she doesn't just suck the life out of you like a normal Amazon. She enjoys inflicting pain on other people. She will literally skin you, beat you, whip you, break your bones, torture you in every way, shape, or form. She's a complete sadist. Ishtar even comments that anytime she gets her hands on a man, they always end up destroyed. And Belle, after seeing that monster, immediately decided to run the fuck away. Unfortunately for Belle, while not everyone in the Pleasure District is a member of the Ishtar familia, they are loyal to it because they run the prostitution. So every prostitute in town basically got the alert that they're looking for the little rookie. And anytime they see him, they just scream at the top of their lungs, he's over here. So no matter how fast Belle is, he can't outrun a city. Fryme is the first person to catch him, and as you can imagine, she decides she's going to do it right in the middle of the street and starts ripping apart his clothes. So that's when Ishtar and the other prostitutes jump Fryme and start beating the crap out of her. Well, more like Fryme throwing them around while they're trying to hold her down. Aisha then declares that she doesn't care if Belle gets away as long as Fryme doesn't get him. And so this is actually when Belle finally gets the chance to escape. And he ducks into one of the buildings and just hides in one of the rooms with the prostitutes. And that's when Belle officially meets Haruhime. The story of Haruhime starts back in the Far East. That's literally the name of the country. It's an island nation ruled over by a god, Amaterasu. Now, Haruhime and her father weren't blessed by this goddess as a member of their familia, but they were a part of the court of this familia, because Haruhime's father was a very rich noble throughout the Far East, and so he was an important member of the court. And so Haruhime was kept on a short leash by her father to be a proper lady of high standing, so she would go through constant teachings and lessons and such. Haruhime, of course, had no issue with this. She was happy to follow her father's word because she was a very kind and respectful daughter. Now, there was an orphanage nearby run by several other lesser gods, and of course this orphanage was filled with Misaka, Oga, Chikasa, and the rest when they were quite young. They heard about a little girl by herself up at the top of the castle without anyone there to play with, so they decided to sneak into her bedroom when they were kids and then took her out to play. And so this became a regular routine where at nightfall they would go out, get Haruhime, and go out and play with her. Obviously, Haruhime saw them as friends, and when she saw how the orphanage was basically impoverished and suffering, she then asked her father if they could give a little bit of donation to the orphanage to help them out for food and such. Now, because he was a member of a court for the god of all of the Far East, he actually looked down on these other gods and this orphanage and such, but he saw it as a stupid whim from a child, and he said, whatever, I'll just throw some money at them. Leave me alone about it. I don't care. I have work to do. And so the orphanage was getting properly funded. That is until Haruhime's father realized she was spending a lot of time with the orphans and not doing her job with her training to be a proper lady, and he decided, nah, screw that. These people are filth. You shouldn't have anything to do with them, and he basically just locked her away. Unfortunately for Haruhime, it got worse from there. Her father made a lot of enemies in the royal court, and so she was then framed for eating an offering to Amaterasu. And so the man really had no choice but to punish his daughter for something he knew she didn't do. And so the best way he thought he could do that was to banish her, but entrust her to a friend of his, a Prum. This Prum was a wealthy merchant, and he was obviously on his way back to his company with Haruhime. Find a place for her she can go. That is when they were attacked by bandits. Bandits took everything from the caravan, including Haruhime, and sold her to the Ishtar familia, where she has been forced to be a prostitute ever since. And that is where she eventually meets Belle. At first, Haruhime actually thought Belle was her client, and she actually started to strip him, but the sight of his collarbone caused her to pass out. After she regained consciousness, Belle explained the situation, and she happily was hiding him within the room. At a certain point, the two of them realized they both liked fairy tales, and so they started talking about them the entire night. This is a pretty big deal for Belle because there really isn't anyone who cares about the old stories that he knows of other than Tiona, but she's part of another familia, so he couldn't really interact with her very much. Plus, Belle knows way more than Tiona does, and so it's really more him giving a lecture. With Haruhime, he was actually able to have like a proper conversation about what they liked about their stories, with the things that made them sad and happy, all kinds of stuff. And so they were able to pass the time doing that. So when the sun finally rose, Haruhime was then able to use the back alleys to sneak Belle out of the pleasure district. When he got back to his familia, everyone basically explained what was going on, what Belle did and what Mikasa were doing. And so they finally all came to the realization that the person that they were looking for was Haruhime, and the person Belle spent all their time with was Mikasa's old friend. Now, the official decision by the familia when it came to Haruhime was to stay out of it, because she was a member of the Ishtar familia. If they messed with that, their entire familia would be annihilated. Belle and Mikasa still wanted to find a way to rescue her, but they decided that the best way to do it was without conflict. Belle, the trusting man that he is, decided to ask Hermes, because Hermes was in the pleasure district, so he might have some information about prostitutes. And what Hermes tells him is that if she's a non-combatant, there's a high possibility you could just buy her, because buying prostitutes' freedom is a common thing, as long as the price is right. Now, this gave Belle and Mikasa hope, but neither of them realized that Haruhime wasn't bought by Ishtar to be a prostitute. She was bought to be a sacrifice. Haruhime has one magic spell. It is referred to as a cheat spell. It allows her to bestow one individual a level boost. So if you're level 3, you go to level 4. Level 4, go to level 5, so on and so forth. But since she's a Renard, there's a way to rip out her soul and implant it into a magical orb. You then shatter the orb, and then each person who has a shard is able to then use that Renard's magic, which means every member of Ishtar's familia could then use level boost. Ishtar's ultimate goal is to use this to wipe out Freya, because the fact is that she hates Freya with a passion. In fact, she hated her so much that when she found out that Freya was infatuated with Belle, she decided to kidnap him. Yeah, you know how the Hestia familia was taking out quests to pay off their debt? Well, it is very common for merchants and others to make contracts with familias where they'll ask them to get certain items they need for their shop in exchange for large sums of money. Well, a merchant group came up to them and basically asked for a similar contract with the Hestia familia. It turned out that they already had a contract with the Ishtar familia, and this was meant to be a trap. The plan was pretty simple. They asked for very specific items that can only be found in a very specific part of the middle floors of the dungeon, so this way the Ishtar familia could easily lay a trap for the Hestia familia. During the ensuing chaos, they did a pass parade on the majority of the familia members, and then used level boosts to beat the shit out of both Belle and Mikasa and kidnap. Now, Mitsuko wasn't meant to be kidnapped, so they just threw her in a cell, so Haruhime easily was able to just free her. As for Belle, the plan was for Ishtar to devour him as a way to spite Freya, but before that could happen, Phryme decided to kidnap Belle and take him to her dungeon, where she was basically going to just torture and rape him. Because she's undesirable, Belle wasn't able to get hard, and so she went off to get an aphrodisiac, which then gave Haruhime time to free Belle. As you can imagine, he first then broke down crying in her arms. That would traumatize any man. But after that, he was then able to then run away with Haruhime, once again through those tunnels. Belle then tries to convince Haruhime to run away with him, but she refuses, because of the collar that's on her neck, which is a magic item that allows Ishtar to know where she's at all times. In the end, it just didn't matter where she went, she'd be found. That's when both Aisha and Mikoto showed up. Mikoto then reveals the truth of the killing stone and what's going to happen to Haruhime, and this is the beginning of the change for Belle to becoming a hero. Aisha obviously challenges Belle, hoping that he would do the right thing and save Haruhime, even if it meant risking the annihilation of his familia. But at this moment, Belle just doesn't have it in him. He's scared of losing everything, and so he of course runs away with Mikoto. This decision to abandon Haruhime and to save himself and his familia basically breaks Belle for a while. But at a certain point, he does finally come to the realization that to do the right thing, to save someone, it's worth risking everything. That to save the life of one is worth risking the lives of the many. That is what true heroism is. That is what a real hero, what a real man would do. And Belle learning this lesson now, to save a prostitute, to save Haruhime, is important. Because this is what allows him to not even flinch at saving Ween and the Xenos. Xenos are monsters. They're the enemies of mankind. So there is no way Belle would ever risk his life for monsters, even if they had a soul. if it wasn't for him learning the lesson now, during this moment to save Haruhime. Now, Belle and Mikasa go in alone against the Ishtar familia to save Haruhime, to stop the ritual for having her soul ripped out. Funny thing is, for the most part, they didn't really have to do much against the Ishtar familia as a whole, because Freya was pissed that Ishtar decided to fuck around with Belle, and so she decided to annihilate her entire familia. So before Ishtar even had a chance to do her war plans, the Freya familia just walked into the Pleasure District and just destroyed Ishtar's entire familia, bit by bit. Now, Freya didn't give two shits about Haruhime or the ritual, so Belle and Mikasa still had to take care of that. Mikasa was able to take care of the majority of the Amazons by basically using herself as a suicide bomber. What she did was she was casting her magic, but she purposely broke the spell, which then caused an Ishtar's fascist, which is literally your magic explodes inside of you and just fucking detonates everywhere. So she blew up like half of the Amazons that were there. The rest then had to basically leave to go fight off the Freya familia, which only left two. That was Phryme and Aisha. Now, Haruhime, even up to this point, didn't want to be rescued. She didn't think she deserved to be rescued. She saw herself as a worthless prostitute who gave her body to men, unworthy of being saved by a hero that she loved in her stories. But because Belle relentlessly continued to go after her, would not flinch, would not give up, was willing to fight Phryme, a level 5, for her, eventually she came to the realization that she has to let herself be rescued, that she has to have someone care for her and love her like a human being. And so, for the first time in her life, Haruhime actually made a decision for herself. The girl who's constantly docile and did whatever her father told her, always did whatever Ishtar told her, basically just lived her life as a doll, finally made a decision for herself. She decided she wanted to be rescued, and she used her level boost on Belle. With the level boost of a level 4 now, Belle was then able to take on Phryme a level 5 by using his overwhelming speed against her, and he was actually able to knock her into the ground. She was then later beaten to near death by Otter and the other executives of the Freya familia, but that doesn't matter right now. What mattered was Aisha. Now, Aisha wanted Belle to save Haruhime, but there were two flaws with that. One, because Ishtar decided to rape her consistently, and to the point where her mind and soul were basically bound to Ishtar, and so she just couldn't go against any of her orders, no matter what they were. So if her orders were to make sure Haruhime does not escape, then that was it. She had to follow that order. She had to fight Belle. But the second one, which was more important, Aisha loves Haruhime, and she wanted to make sure that there was a man that could protect her, that Belle was worthy of being her hero. And the only way she saw Belle could do that was by beating her. Funny thing is, Belle was thinking something very similar, and so he actually waited for the level boost to wear off so he could then have a fair level 3 on level 3 fight with Aisha. And they go ham on each other. Like, Aisha is a much more experienced fighter, and she also has multiple forms of martial arts and she's just beating the shit out of Belle. Belle luckily has his speed advantage. Eventually they decide to clash with Aisha's magic and Belle's Argonaut ability, and they cancel each other out. And so they end with one giant charge. Belle actually punches Aisha in the stomach. She then says that's too weak, grabs him by the head, knees him in the skull, and he's half unconscious after that, and she's about to do it one more time just to finish him off, when Belle, at point blank range, his fist is still in her stomach, uses Firebolt. She goes flying and just falls back down with a crashing thud. They're on concrete floor and it shatters on impact. That is how hard the explosion was. It also caused severe burns on Belle's hand because it was at point blank range, so he burned himself. But he successfully beat her, and he successfully saved Haruhime. Freya then pushes Ishtar off a building. Now, this doesn't kill Ishtar because gods can't die because they have Arcanum, but if you use Arcanum in the mortal world, you're sent back to heaven. So, Ishtar was sent back to heaven, which completely abolished the Ishtar familia. As a result of this, Haruhime was now free, officially, not just from being a sacrifice, but from being a member of the Ishtar familia. She then joined the Hestia familia as a supporter, mage, and maid. She's now also deeply in love with Belle, but doesn't think she's worthy of being his wife, because while she's grown as a person, she still has that self-loathing that she has, but she does think it's okay to be his mistress. So yeah, any of you out there are hoping for the harem ending, Haruhime has already signed up for that, so there you go. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give a thumbs up so you can enjoy more Danmachi and other many things. Thank you, and have a great day.